Hiya, it's Amanda here from Lolli Crafts, and today I have for you a card that is like a pet sympathy card. So if you know someone who's sadly lost a beloved pet, then this is a perfect card for that. Okay, so I thought we'd just take a quick look at the page on the Cricut Design Space so you could just have a quick look at what I did. It was a pretty simple card, but if you don't want the bother of doing it yourself, then do go to the blog post. It will have a link to the download which I have created so that you don't have to worry about doing it if you don't want to. Okay, so just to explain in brief, all I did was take a card base that I found that had this rounded corners. Again, you could use one with square if you wanted to do that. I just liked the rounded corners. I then took a square with rounded corners just from these shapes section, and I made it, this is a 5-inch square card, and I made it a 1/4 inch smaller, and I did 2 of those, one for the inside, this one's for the inside, and one for the outside. So I duplicated those first because it was easier to do that before I did anything else. The next thing I did was my little verse. So I clicked on text, and then I typed out the words that I wanted. I then fiddled around with the font to get the font that I wanted, and then I positioned it, and then I clicked on the words and the square here, and then I clicked on attach. You need to attach because otherwise the Cricut will cut out the square and it will write the writing somewhere completely random because it won't understand that you want that writing on that piece of card. So you need to make sure you do attach. If for any reason, if you do download this and you don't have this particular font and you want to change it, all you need to do is click on this here and then do detach down here. And then when you do detach, it will then separate that wording from the background card, and you can then adjust the font accordingly. You can see up here it's got the different fonts, and you can drop down and choose which one that you have already in stock yourself. So you can easily undo that and change that, because the fonts tend to be more expensive. So if you don't have that, it may be that you don't want to purchase this specific font. I really liked it, so I wanted it anyway because I think I will use that again. But again, that is obviously a nice easy one to change if you need to. Then for the second piece here, I found a nice image of this heart with the paw print. Again, you may have something similar, maybe just a couple of paws or a paw or just a heart, whatever you think would work if you've got it in stock. But if not, you've got it here ready done. I think this particular image was something like the 99p ones, and of course if you've got Cricut access, all of this is free anyway. So you then have that image, you place it where you want it over that square, and then you click on the image and the background piece of card, this is the white one, and then you go down here and you click slice. You then remove 1 layer and then 2 layers. So the first layer is the actual image that you've put over the top to slice the white card, and then the next layer is the removal of the white card, so that leaves you with this aperture in your white card, and then you just want to delete those 2 that you've just removed. Then I just position it just because it doesn't need positioning, but I just do because it makes me understand what I'm doing with the cards, and also for you guys when you come in, if you're going to get the downloads from me, it just makes it make more sense. And also you can double check that everything sort of fits together okay, that all the gaps around the edges are correct and the positioning looks okay, etc. Okay, and that was it. It was pretty simple. So now let's go over to the Cricut and get cutting. Okay, so I'm using the app on my phone for this particular cut. So I'm just clicking now on Make It, and then it says next, and it asks me to select the accessory. So obviously I select the Cricut that I want. It might be you have more than one different types, so I've gone for my maker here. That's the only one that applies for Design Space in my case. I then am told to insert the mat, so I do that. It then asks me to select the material, so just whichever material is applicable for what you're using. I think on this case I'm using heavy cardstock, so I went for that, and that cut through fine. but it may vary, as I say, depending on what materials you're using, and also per machine. You may find that some machines just seem to need slightly heavier. I find with this particular maker that I'm using, it seems to need me to use a heavier cut than I would normally perhaps choose to do, so I have to sort of go up one than I would normally use, say, on my just regular Cricut. But it just varies, I think, per machine. So it's cut that bit out for that mat, and then I'll eject that. You can see the little flashing light ready to tell me to eject that mat. I then get ready to get the other mat done. So again, I'm selecting the paper. You saw here last time I put the mat in ready to go, but this time I didn't, because I knew I had to put the pen in, so I wanted to do that first before I started putting the paper in, because you know, you never know, if you just push a little bit hard or whatever, you might accidentally mark the paper. You shouldn't be able to go too far. It should click and that should be fine, but it's just a little thing to make sure in my mind that I'm not going to mark my cardstock. And you can see here that it's writing out all of that lovely text, which I love watching it do that. It just fascinates me so much when it does that. And then it's sort of having a little think. I sort of cut a little bit of that out because it seemed to think for ages, and then it goes off and does its cut. And in this case we're cutting around the writing, but we're also cutting out our paw print layer as well. So here are all the bits cut out. So we've got our writing layer for the inside of the card, and you can see how it really writes that out very beautifully, considering it's quite an elaborate text as well. It does come out really, really nicely. And then we've got our paw print layer there that we've cut out, and then my card base as well. Now that's a standard 5x5, so you'll find that you should have an envelope, I'm sure, in your stash that would fit, but if not, Cricut does have envelopes, so you could make one to fit it as well if you wanted to. That isn't on the download, but it's easy enough to find. So all I'm doing now is just lining it up with the 5-inch mark and scoring down the centre there, just making sure it's right down the middle of those little round corners, so it folds over lovely, making sure it lines up on those corners before I sort of go down the back of the score line, just to make sure it's absolutely lovely lined up, because particularly with these rounded corners it really shows if you don't get it matched up properly. Sometimes with the square ones you can get away with it, but the rounded ones, they really show if you don't get it right. So it's important just to make sure you line everything up nicely for that. So pop that to one side. I'm going to just grab my paw print layer, and I wanted to add just something a little extra, which is why I put the paw print part just that little bit higher, because I wanted to add some twine around the bottom just to give it a little bit more interest. Now it looks like I've got quite a lot, but I am going to wind it around quite a few times. I also always do a little bit extra than what I would need, really, because when you go to tie a bow, it is so much easier to do it if you do have that little bit more. I know it's a little bit wasteful, but it really does help. So I'm just wrapping that around just really till I kind of think, oh yeah, that's going to give me enough. And you can see at the moment, you've got to be careful. You can see it showing through at the back there. So you're just going to be careful when you do finish up that it's not going to be showing through. You want to make sure that the back is going to stay put. And you'll see in a minute how I get that done. But it's just, it is a little bit fiddly, because the twine always sort of gets sort of in a twiddle with itself. It kind of curls around, so it can be a bit fiddly, but don't worry, just persist and you'll get there. It's just a case of, you know, keep going and it will work. So there you see I've pulled the two pieces to the side. That's as far as it's going to go. I'm not worrying about positions of my actual strings at this point in time. I'm just making sure they're not overlapping the gap, and that by using this bit of tape, it's just going to hold it in place in the back there to make sure that it doesn't slide up and sort of go through where the aperture is, so you can see it. And then I'm going to start by first of all just doing a regular knot, And what you'll see is that I'll do a single knot first, which you should see on here, but slightly off camera, unfortunately, because obviously I was trying to see what I was doing. But what I do is I'm actually going to put this layer of string there that you can see. I'm actually just tucking it behind the layers of string that or twine that I've wrapped around, and the reason for that is to pull it in to create that kind of so that the twine has, well, you'll see it gets thinner at this point where the knot is, and then what I'll do is I'm going to stretch out the pieces at the side, and it just pulls that in and gives it a really nice shape. You want to make sure you don't do it too tight. It's quite easy to do that. So you can see how it's kind of made it quite narrow at that point. And then I'm just fiddling with the knot, making sure it's in the right position. And now I'm just fiddling with those twine pieces at the side and just positioning them to give that effect of it being slightly wider at the side to where that area is where the bow's going to be. Now, one side you can see is slightly different to the other. I deliberately didn't make them even, but you could do if you want to. It's really up to you. And then I just created a bow on that area as well. Again, with the twine, it can be fiddly because your little bow pieces there, your little roundy bits there of the bow can start twisting. You can see there I had it starting to twist a little bit, so I just trying really hard to make sure that I keep them nice and rounded. And then you can see there is quite a bit of excess really of the twine, but it does make it so much easier when you're trying to do that bow. And overall, frankly, I just think it's worth it. And if you want, you can always keep those little pieces and make some tiny little bows if you want to, and put them in your stash and use them for later. So then all I did was take my inner piece and just put some regular tape on the back, just one of these pen tapes. It's perfectly enough for that layer. It's not too heavy, so that will sit in nicely. And I just popped that on the inside. I thought that sentiment was really nice. I really liked that as well, so that I thought worked really nicely. And originally I was going to try and put it on the outside, but it just didn't fit. Obviously it was quite big, and I thought, oh, I'll do half. I fiddled around with it, doing it in different ways, but decided in the end that I preferred it completely on the inside, keep the outside just really clean and simple with just the paw print and just a little bit of twine at the bottom. So you can see here I've got quite a lot of foam, but the reason for that is you've got this aperture and you don't want the bits of the aperture sinking down. And what you'll see here is I'm just pressing on it just to make sure there aren't any bits that are going to dip down when it has some pressure on it, because it would really spoil the look of it, especially if you post it and it gets kind of squashed in the post and then you end up with bits that are sunk down. I just think it, for the sake of a bit of foam tape, it's just not worth that, and you can finish it off really nicely by just adding that little bit of extra. You'll also notice that I added some wet glue to the back of the foam. If you've been with me a while, you know I do that all the time, because foam tape, I find, tends to, in central heating, come away from the card quite quickly. I don't know why, it just seems to do that. So I always add that wet glue to the back just to give it that extra adhesion so that the card will actually last that bit longer. And also in this case, as you can see, for some reason I just could not get this straight. I was putting it on in all sorts of wonkiness, so it gave me that extra bit of time as well to actually straighten that piece up to put it down correctly, because I was making a right mess of it. And there it is done, a really simple, clean card, but I think really effective. I think for something like this you don't want it to be too much. It's just a nice little gesture, and I think it works really, really well. And it could work, you could do it in different colours and actually be like, congratulations on your new puppy as well, I guess. I mean, it's all sorts of cuteness, so there's all sorts of uses for it, but I just thought it worked really well for a pet condolence. And so I hope you like it. I hope you've enjoyed making this card with me, and I will see you again soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. Bye.